They say a surgeon's hands never shake. I've spent years believing that. Years convincing myself that control is everything. That if I can steady my hands in the face of life and death, I can steady myself through anything. But hands don't shake when they're numb. And standing in my kitchen that morning, watching my wife Isabel smile at my brother Damien, I felt nothing. No rage, no heartbreak, no betrayal. Just a quiet, creeping emptiness. I should have felt something. Anything. But when you cut open enough bodies, when you've seen what lies underneath the skin, you realize that even the strongest foundations can rot from the inside before the first cracks show. And my family, the family I built, the one I sacrificed for, was already dead. I just hadn't seen the autopsy report yet. The night before Logan's graduation, I was in my study, reviewing patient charts, when my phone buzzed. A private number. A message. You see only shadows. I stared at it for a long time, maybe longer than I should have. I'm a rational man, a scientist. I deal in evidence, not paranoia. So I put my phone down, dismissed it as a mistake, and went back to my work. That was my first mistake. The next morning, I sipped my coffee and watched the backyard fill with caterers, decorators, people setting up tables, arranging flowers, hanging lights. A celebration of my son's future. A future I had worked tirelessly to give him. But all I could see was them. Damien and Isabel, standing just a little too close. The way her hand lingered on his arm. The way he leaned in to whisper something that made her laugh. That laugh. The same one she used to give me. I should have been surprised. I should have been angry. But instead, I just stood there, watching, realizing something I think I had known for a long time but never wanted to admit. I was the outsider in my own home. I excused myself before the guests arrived and made a phone call. A number I had been given months ago, when whispers about financial discrepancies at the hospital had started surfacing. I had ignored them then. Just noise, I had thought. But now, I wasn't so sure. Nicholas Carter? I asked when the line connected. The voice on the other end was deep, measured. Dr. Hayes, I was wondering when you'd call. Nick was an ex-FBI investigator who had built a reputation for uncovering the kind of secrets that destroyed lives. The kind of secrets that, I was beginning to realize, were already destroying mine. I need answers, I said. There was a pause, then a quiet sigh. Then you need to prepare yourself. By the time the sun had set and guests filled my home, the answers were already in my hands. Nick arrived through the back in trance, a thick folder tucked under his arm. He didn't waste time. He placed it on my desk and slid it toward me. I opened it. Bank statements. Transfers. A hidden account under Isabel's name. Offshore holdings. And then, Logan's name. My stomach twisted. Nick watched me, his expression unreadable. That's not the worst of it. I didn't move. Didn't speak. I just waited. Nick slid another paper forward. A DNA test. 99.8% probability of non-paternity. Everything in me went still. I had spent 20 years raising him, loving him, protecting him. He was never mine. My hands didn't shake. My breathing didn't change. Years of surgery had trained me for this moment, to function under pressure, to detach from emotion, to focus on the cut, the damage, the repair. But this wasn't something I could fix. Nick was silent for a long time before finally speaking. They think they've won. I looked at him. Something cold and steady settled in my chest. They don't know who they're playing with. I walked out of my study and into the party. The music, the laughter, the golden glow of the lanterns. It all felt fake, like a scene from a play. I moved through the crowd, stopping to shake hands, nodding at congratulations, wearing the mask of a proud father, a happy husband. And then, I saw them. Damien near the bar, a drink in hand, laughing at something Logan said. Logan, his son, not mine, smiling up at him like he was the real father. The kind of look I hadn't seen directed at me in years. Isabel moving through the crowd, effortless, graceful, her hand brushing Damien's arm as she passed, his fingers grazing her waist. It was subtle, careful, the way you hide something in plain sight. She turned and saw me, her expression lighting up in that well-practiced way. She approached, placing a warm hand on my arm. There you are, she said softly. Everything okay? I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in years, I felt nothing. Perfect, I said, my voice smooth. She leaned in, lowering her voice. Logan wants to talk to you later. Something important. I nodded. I'm sure he does. Nick had warned me. They're making their final move soon. They think you're blind. That's when they'll strike. So I waited. The party stretched into the night. Laughter, music, a celebration built on lies. And then, when they thought no one was watching, it happened. Damien and Isabel, slipping away to the garden, hidden from the crowd. Their bodies too close, his hands gripping her hips, her fingers tangled in his hair. And then the kiss. Not a hesitant kiss, not a mistake. The kind of kiss that had been stolen 1,000 times before. I just stood there, watching. And in that moment, I wasn't heartbroken. I was free. For years, I had been living in someone else's story, playing the role of the devoted husband, the proud father. And they had let me. They had used me. But now, I was rewriting the ending. I could have confronted them right then. I could have made a scene, shattered the illusion in front of everyone, let rage consume me. But I am not a man ruled by emotion. I am a surgeon. I don't react. I cut. So I turned and walked away. Tomorrow, I would make the first incision. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed beside Isabel, staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing. She slept peacefully, unaware, unbothered. No guilt, no fear. The woman who had kissed my brother just hours ago, who had spent years lying to me, stealing from me, using me. She was here, wrapped in silk sheets, dreaming in the safety of the home I built. I could feel the warmth of her body inches away from mine. It made my skin crawl. I wanted to ask her, just once, was it ever real? But I already knew the answer. At 5 a.m., I got out of bed, showered, dressed, and went downstairs. The house was still, silent. The remains of last night's party were scattered across the patio. Empty glasses, forgotten napkins, the scent of burned-out candles hanging in the air. I stepped outside, breathing in the crisp morning air, my mind turning over the details, the evidence, the sheer weight of 20 years of betrayal. Nick's car was already parked down the street. He was leaning against the hood, a cup of coffee in one hand, a folder in the other. He didn't look surprised to see me. Couldn't sleep? He asked. I didn't answer. He handed me the folder. I spent the night pulling records. Offshore accounts, hidden transactions. She and Damien have been planning this for a long time. The financial side is airtight. They're trying to gut your assets before you catch on. I flipped through the pages, scanning the numbers, the dates. Logan? I asked, voice even. Nick exhaled, rubbing a hand over his jaw. Yeah, he's involved. Not directly, but he knows more than he's saying. Damien's been setting up trust funds in his name, transferring money piece by piece. Maybe he's been manipulated. Maybe he's complicit. I don't know yet. But he didn't tell you. I closed the folder. It was one thing to lose a wife, another to lose a son. But to lose them both to the same betrayal? That was a different kind of wound. Nick leaned back against the car, watching me carefully. So what's the play, Doc? I took a slow breath, feeling the cold air settle in my lungs. I had spent my life in control, mastering precision, making life-or-death decisions in the operating room. Now, I needed to apply the same precision to this. I wasn't just going to confront them. I was going to ruin them. I need you to freeze the offshore accounts, I said. Make sure neither of them can touch a cent. Nick nodded. Done. Pull everything you can on Damien's hospital records. I want a full audit, every transaction, every decision he's made since the day he started. Nick gave me a sharp grin. Now you're thinking like an FBI agent. I shook my head. No, I'm thinking like a surgeon. Because this wasn't just revenge. This was surgery, cutting out the disease before it could spread any further. By the time I walked back into the house, Isabel was awake, standing in the kitchen in one of her silk robes, sipping coffee like she didn't have a single care in the world. She looked up when she saw me, smiling. You're up early, she said. I nodded, moving to the coffee maker, pouring myself a cup. I could feel her eyes on me, studying, calculating. Last night was nice, she continued. Logan had a great time. You should talk to him today. He really wants to discuss his future. I took a slow sip of my coffee, watching her over the rim of my cup. His future, I repeated. She tilted her head, feigning curiosity. Yes, he has big plans. Plans that didn't include me. Plans that involved the money she and Damien had been stealing from me for years. I forced a small smile. I'll talk to him. She exhaled, relieved, and turned away to grab her phone. That's when I saw it. Her wedding ring. It wasn't there. I stared at the bare skin of her left hand, my mind racing, my pulse a slow, controlled rhythm. Had she taken it off last night? Did she ever even wear it when I wasn't around? She must have noticed my silence because she looked back at me. What? I shook my head. Nothing. She smiled again. I have an appointment in the city this afternoon. Shopping with some of the girls. Lies. I nodded like I believed her. Have fun. She kissed my cheek before leaving, her lips barely grazing my skin. I stood there long after she was gone, staring at my untouched coffee, feeling the weight of everything I had ignored for too long. It was time. At noon, Logan finally emerged from his room, stretching like he had no weight on his shoulders, like his world was as perfect as it had always been. Morning, he muttered. I set my newspaper down and studied him. My son. Except he wasn't. Not biologically. Not anymore. Logan, I said evenly, we need to talk. He hesitated for half a second, then nodded, sitting across from me at the dining table. He was nervous. I folded my hands together, my voice calm. Tell me about the trust fund Damien set up for you. His breath hitched. Just slightly. He tried to play it off, laughing. I don't know what you're talking about. I said nothing. His smile faltered. Dad. Alexander, I corrected him. He blinked. What? I'm not your father, I said simply. We've both known that for a while now, haven't we? The silence stretched between us. Logan swallowed, his face pale. I didn't. I leaned forward, my voice steady. I want the truth, Logan. All of it. His jaw clenched. He looked away. Then, finally, he exhaled, shaking his head. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. Like this. He wasn't denying it. You knew, I said, my voice dangerously soft. His silence was my answer. I nodded slowly, the final nail in the coffin of the life I thought I had. I stood. Get out. Logan's head snapped up. What? You heard me. His chair scraped against the floor as he stood. Dad. I'm not your dad, I said again, my voice like steel. And I don't owe you anything. Not anymore. His face twisted with something between shock and panic. Where am I supposed to go? I shrugged. Damien is your father. Go to him. He stood there, frozen, as if he couldn't believe what was happening, as if he had expected me to do what I had always done. Forgive, provide, love. Not this time. Not ever again. I turned away, walked out of the room, leaving him standing there, stunned and silent. When the front door finally opened and shut behind him, I felt nothing. For the first time in 20 years, I was truly free. Tomorrow, I'd take the next step. Tomorrow, I'd make sure Isabel and Damien lost everything. The house was quiet after Logan left. I stood in the doorway for a long time, staring at the empty driveway where his car had been. I should have felt something. Some kind of pain, regret, something. But I didn't. I had lost him long before today. I walked back inside, closing the door behind me. The walls of this house, once filled with laughter, now felt hollow. A museum of a life that had never truly belonged to me. A carefully constructed illusion. Not anymore. I grabbed my phone and dialed Nick. It's done, I said when he picked up. There was a pause. Then, Logan? Gone. Nick let out a low whistle. Cold, Doc. Necessary, I corrected. He exhaled. You ready for the next step? I looked around the house. My house, bought with my money, built on my sacrifice, and felt nothing but clarity. Yes. 2 hours later, I was sitting in Nick's office, a place as clinical and precise as any surgical theater. He had already pulled up Damien's hospital records, financial history, offshore transfers, Everything. He pushed a folder toward me. Damien's in deep, he said, tapping the file. Not just with your money. He's been siphoning from the hospital's cancer research fund. Small amounts at first, easy to miss, but over the years, millions. I clenched my jaw. He delayed pediatric trials, Nick continued. That's the kind of thing that gets people killed. I exhaled slowly, pressing my fingers against my temple. This is beyond fraud, I said. Nick nodded. It's criminal negligence. And when the hospital board finds out, Damien is done. I flipped through the documents. Isabel? I asked. Nick smirked. She's been playing a long con. You were plan A, Damien is plan B. But she's already securing a plan C, an escape route. She's been setting up a separate account in Europe under an alias. She's planning to disappear. I sat back, staring at the ceiling. She was done with both of us, using Damien the same way she used me. I almost laughed. Almost. Nick leaned forward. So what do you want to do? I met his gaze. I want them to watch everything they built burn before they realize the fire started in their own hands. Nick grinned. Now you're speaking my language. By evening, the first strike landed. I sat in my car outside Summit Medical, watching the board members file into the conference room, clutching thick packets of documents. Inside those files were years of financial fraud, every shady transaction, every stolen cent. It was a slow kill. At first, the meeting was quiet, controlled. Then came the murmurs, the confused glances, the first flickers of panic. And then, Damien's voice, loud, defensive. I could imagine it perfectly. What the hell is this? Where did you get this information? This isn't what it looks like. But Damien wasn't me. He didn't have my composure, my ability to control a room. And unlike me, he wasn't respected. He was tolerated. And now, they had no reason to tolerate him anymore. The meeting lasted 27 minutes before he was escorted out. I watched from my car as he stormed into the parking lot, yanking out his phone, dialing Isabel's number. She didn't pick up. Of course, she didn't. She was already busy securing her exit strategy. At home, I poured myself a drink and waited. I didn't have to wait long. The front door slammed open. Damien's footsteps thundered through the house. You son of a bitch. I turned slowly, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. Damien's face was red. His jaw clenched so tight I thought he might break his own teeth. You think this is over, he spat. You think you can just destroy me like this? I took a slow sip of my whiskey, then placed the glass down carefully. You destroyed yourself, I said simply. Damien's nostrils flared. He took a step forward, his fists clenched. For the first time in my life, I saw him clearly. Not my brother. Not the golden child who always charmed his way out of trouble. Just a man. A desperate, pathetic man who had taken everything from me and still thought he could win. You took my wife, I said quietly. You took my son. And then you stole from sick children to fund your pathetic lifestyle. His face twisted. I gave Logan more than you ever did. My fingers curled around my glass. You took a child that wasn't yours and made him into a thief. You turned my wife into a liar. And you turned yourself into a dead man walking. Damien laughed, but it was hollow. Forced. What? You think you're some kind of god? Some untouchable genius? You're just... His phone rang. He pulled it out of his pocket, still fuming. But when he saw the caller ID, his whole face changed. The color drained from his skin. His hands trembled. I already knew who it was. I leaned back in my chair, watching as Summit Medical's legal team delivered the final blow. Damien's breath hitched. His shoulders sagged. I took another slow sip of whiskey as he turned his gaze back to me, hollow and defeated. You ruined me, he whispered. I tilted my head. No, Damien. You ruined you. I just made sure everyone else saw it. His phone slipped from his hand, clattering onto the floor. I didn't move. He swallowed hard, his jaw working like he was about to say something. Something final, something desperate. Instead, he turned and walked out the door. I didn't follow. I already knew where he was going. Straight to Isabel. Straight into the final trap. I didn't sleep that night. Again. I sat by the window, sipping the last of my whiskey, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. At 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. "Nick, it's happening," he said. "Where?" "The hotel downtown. Room 514. She booked it under a fake name, just like you said she would. Damien just got there 10 minutes ago." I exhaled slowly, and then I smiled. I could picture it perfectly. Damien, storming into the hotel room, demanding answers. Isabel, pretending to be shocked. Lying. Spinning another web, another trap. Until she realized her own bank accounts had been frozen, too. Until Damien realized she had been siphoning his money, just like she had done to me. Until they realized they had nothing left. Just two desperate liars, trapped in a room with no way out. Nick's voice cut through my thoughts. "What do you want me to do?" I looked down at my watch. Then I closed my eyes and said the only thing that made sense. Let them destroy each other. And then I went to bed. For the first time in years, I slept like a man who had finally, cut out the cancer that had been rotting his life from the inside. When I woke up, the house was quiet. No Logan. No Isabel. No Damien. For the first time in 20 years, I was alone. I should have felt loss. I should have felt something. Instead, I just sat there in the morning silence, sipping my coffee, breathing. Then my phone buzzed. "Nick, they're turning on each other," he said. I let out a slow breath, stretching my legs out in front of me. "Tell me." He laughed. "It's a damn mess, Doc." Damien went to the hotel thinking Isabel would run with him. But when he found out she had been siphoning his money too, he lost it. I smiled. Of course she had. Isabel was a survivor. She had never planned to go down with Damien. Nick continued. "Security kicked them out after guests complained about the screaming, but not before they gave the lobby quite a show." I could picture it. Damien furious, Isabel cornered, the reality of their downfall sinking in. "Where are they now?" I asked. "Damien's trying to salvage what he can. Lawyers, connections, doesn't matter. No one's touching him now. Summit Medical is officially launching a full-blown fraud investigation. His career is over." "And Isabel?" Nick let out a low whistle. "Her bank accounts are locked. No credit cards, no cash. She has nothing. She spent the night at some low-rent motel." I took another sip of coffee. "Perfect." There was a long pause on the line. Then Nick asked, "What about Logan?" I stared at the wall, remembering the look in my son's eyes before I told him to leave. I exhaled. He made his choice. Nick didn't push. "All right," he said. "What's next?" I stood, rolling my shoulders, feeling lighter than I had in years. We finished this. By noon, the final move was in play. I had spent years building my life. Now, I was going to make sure they couldn't rebuild theirs. Nick had the evidence delivered to every major medical board in the state. The fraud, the theft, the misallocation of research funds, everything. There would be no comeback for Damien. Meanwhile, Isabel was scrambling. She called old friends, trying to charm her way back in. But their silence spoke volumes. Her social circle had thrived on appearances. And now, she wasn't an elegant, admired woman. She was a liability. By evening, I got the text I had been waiting for. "Nick, it's done. Damien's license is suspended. Isabel's locked out of every financial avenue. Logan, well, he's on his own." I stared at the message for a long time. This was the moment I had been working toward. And yet, as I sat there, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even satisfied. I was just free. I deleted Nick's message and went to bed. For the first time in years, I didn't dream of them. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of silence. No calls. No messages. No surprise visits. The house felt different now. Lighter. Cleaner. Like the ghosts that had haunted it had finally been exorcised. I spent the mornings at Summit Medical, where the board was still sorting through the wreckage Damien had left behind. He had done more damage than I realized. Patients had suffered, funding had vanished, and trust had been shattered. They offered me a position on the board. I declined. I had no interest in cleaning up his mess. I spent my evenings at the gym, the sound of my fists slamming into the heavy bag drowning out the echoes of the past. I ran until my lungs burned, lifted until my arms shook. I didn't want revenge anymore. I just wanted to be done with them. And I was. Until Logan showed up at my door. It was late. Almost midnight. I opened the door to find him standing on my porch, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow. He looked nothing like the confident young man who had stood beside Damien at his graduation party. He looked lost. "Dad," he said, voice rough. I stared at him for a long moment before stepping aside. He walked in, moving like a man who didn't know where he belonged. I waited until he sat down before I spoke. "What do you want, Logan?" He flinched at the flatness in my tone. "I didn't know," he said. "Not all of it." I didn't answer. He ran a hand through his hair. "I knew about Mom and Uncle Damien. I knew they were." He swallowed hard. "I knew, but I didn't know about the money, about what they were really doing." I leaned back in my chair, studying him. He was lying. Not completely, but he was still holding something back. "Why are you here?" I asked. His jaw tightened. "Mom's broke. Damien's ruined. And He hesitated. "I lost my scholarship." There it was. I exhaled, rubbing a hand over my face. "So you came to me because you need money." He winced, but didn't deny it. I let the silence stretch between us. "Do you know how many times I woke up at 3 a.m. to take you to hockey practice?" I asked quietly. Logan blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "Do you know how many surgeries I skipped watching so I could be at your games?" His throat bobbed as he swallowed. "Dad." "How many nights I sat up late, helping you with your homework, believing that you were my son." Logan's face crumpled. "I didn't know," he whispered. "You knew enough," I said, my voice calm. "And you still chose them." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw it in his eyes. Regret, shame, maybe even love. But it was too late. "I can't help you, Logan," I said, standing. He inhaled sharply, eyes going wide. "What?" I met his gaze. "I spent 20 years being your father. That ended the day you called another man dad." He opened his mouth, but there was nothing left to say. When he finally stood, his movements were slow, reluctant. He walked to the door, hesitated, then turned back. "Was it all fake?" he asked. His voice was small. I exhaled. "No," I said honestly, "but it's over." Logan nodded, and then he left. I watched from the window as he got into his car, sat there for a long moment, then drove off into the night. I didn't stop him. I had already let him go. A year passed. Not quickly. Not in the way time is supposed to move, slipping through your fingers before you can catch it. No, this was a slow kind of time. The kind that stretches out, that lingers in the empty spaces of a house that used to be full. I felt it in the quiet mornings when I woke up alone. I felt it in the empty driveway where Logan's car used to be. I felt it in the way I moved through the house, noticing the absence of things before I noticed what was still there. But eventually, something shifted. One day, I walked into the kitchen and realized I wasn't waiting for the sound of another voice. I poured a cup of coffee and didn't imagine Isabel standing beside me. I sat outside in the evening and didn't expect Logan to pull into the driveway, coming home late from a friend's house. I wasn't waiting anymore. And that's when I knew I had finally let go. Damien tried to fight. Of course he did. He hired lawyers, burned through every last cent he had, tried to claw his way back to something that resembled power. It didn't work. The evidence was too much. The damage was too severe. His medical license was revoked, his reputation shattered. No one wanted him. No one trusted him. Last I heard, he was living in Florida, working at some back alley clinic, taking whatever patients he could get. A man who once thought he was untouchable, now reduced to nothing. And Isabel? She fought too, for a while. Tried to talk her way back into the social circles that had once adored her. It didn't last. Rich women don't forgive scandal. They don't welcome back the woman who fell from grace. She burned through whatever money she had left, moving from city to city, staying in cheap hotels, trying to find a way back to a life that had already moved on without her. She never did. The last time I saw her, it was by accident. I was leaving a restaurant when I heard my name. I turned, and there she was. She looked different. The glow she had spent years perfecting was gone. The confidence, the effortless charm, it had faded. She looked tired. "Alexander," she breathed. I didn't say anything. She wrapped her arms around herself, shifting on her feet. Can we talk? There was a time when my chest would have ached at the sight of her. A time when I would have wanted answers. But now? Now, I just felt nothing. There's nothing left to say, I told her. She swallowed, her throat moving as she tried to find the right words. I never meant. Don't. Her eyes flickered. Hurt, regret, hope, all tangled together. You made your choices, I said, my voice steady. And now you live with them. Her breath hitched. Do you ever think about what we had? I looked at her for a long time. Then I shook my head. No. Something in her broke. I saw it happen, the way her face crumpled, the way her body sagged just slightly, like the last piece of her carefully constructed world had just fallen apart. She whispered something, maybe my name, maybe an apology, but I was already walking away. She didn't follow. And that was the last time I ever saw Isabel Hayes. Logan reached out a few times. Not to apologize. Not to fix things. Just to talk. An email here. A message there. Nothing too deep. Nothing too personal. I never responded. The last thing he sent me was a photo. His medical school acceptance letter. No caption. No request. Just the picture. I stared at it for a long time. And then I closed the message. Life moved forward. Not all at once. Not like flipping a switch. It happened in small ways. I started hiking again, something I hadn't done since before medical school. I spent my weekends in the mountains, alone with nothing but my thoughts and the sound of the wind through the trees. I let go of the weight that had once sat on my chest like a stone. And one day, when I wasn't expecting it, I met Eleanor. It wasn't planned. She was a trauma surgeon, sharp and steady, the kind of person who didn't break under pressure. We met at a conference, both of us disinterested in the endless networking, both of us just looking for a quiet place to escape the noise. She caught me watching her once, smiled, raised an eyebrow. You look like someone who doesn't like small talk, she said. I smirked. You look like someone who hates it even more than I do. And that was how it started. Not with fireworks. Not with drama. Just understanding. She never asked about my past. And I never felt the need to tell her. We built something real. Something steady. A year after we met, she moved in. And for the first time in my life, my house finally felt like a home. 5 years passed. I had a new life. A new family. A new name on my daughter's birth certificate. One that belonged to someone I could trust. Ava Eleanor Hayes. She had my eyes, Eleanor's fierce determination, and none of the ghosts that had once haunted my past. I never told her about Isabel, or Damien, or Logan. She didn't need to know, because that story was over. Then, one day, I got an email. No sender name, no subject, just one line. Do you ever think about what we had? I stared at it for a long time, and then I deleted it, without opening it, without responding, without a second thought, because the answer was still the same. No, and I never thought about Isabel Hayes again.